I'm loving this setup, by the way, because it makes me look like a solid four, and I usually look like a solid minus one potato. I actually started blogging around 10 years ago when I was 15. It was a very basic blog about what was going on in school, how my GCSEs were coming along, the latest rumour, the coolest teacher, all that kind of very generic basic stuff. And it was great. It was nothing special. Blogging back then was nothing special. You didn't do it to earn money. You didn't do it to get a certain status or free PR packages or anything like that. It was your little corner of the internet, and that was it. It was great. I was lucky if I got 3 or 4 views a month, and most of those views were probably me, making sure that everything looked as I envisaged. It was a great time. It was a great little escape from GCSEs, from being in school, and from not really knowing who I was. I felt like I knew myself, and I was very sure of myself when I was online. I stopped, it just fizzled. I went to college, I lived my life, and then around 3 or 4 years ago, I started really missing it, and I wasn't sure what I was missing. I didn't know whether I was missing owning that piece of the internet or being creative and expressive. I've always been a creative and expressive person. I just I've never known how to express that creativity. And when I was 15, the blog was my piece of creativity. It was my own stance. It was great. So around 3 years ago, I went back to it and I started under Everyday Dan. And that quickly changed because I realised there was a lot of everyday insert name. And so with dancooledaily, I used to steal recipes from my mum's cupboard every time I'd come round for Sunday dinner, and I'd try and bake them as best as I could, but I'm in no way a baker. I do good taste, I do not do good presentation, and I would write about the latest Lush bath bomb or the latest Little Mix album, and it became very stale very quickly because I realised that in the years that I'd been away from blogging and in the years that I'd been away from writing online, it had all changed and everyone wanted to be a blogger. You could become a social influencer, you could earn money and live your life as well as you wanted to by being successful on the internet, and that just wasn't possible when I started. So it was a lot to take in, and I realised that everyone was doing Lush Bath Bomb reviews and everyone was reviewing music and everyone was talking about the latest fashion, and that's fine, that is great. It is great to see people create completely different content around the same subject, and that is fantastic, but it was never me, and I always felt like upon returning to it that I wasn't being my true authentic self, and I wasn't I wasn't changing the way that the internet had changed, I think is what I'm trying to say. Around that time I had started understanding my mental health, and I was starting to really try and pay attention to who I was on the inside, and I was trying to listen to my own headspace, and at times my own headspace was getting very saturated and very loud, and I didn't like it, and I never knew how to cope. And I'd never been to a doctor about my mental health. I'd never sat and spoke with someone about how I was feeling or the things that I'd been through, because I thought that people went through life and they went through the problems with life and they just came out and carried on. And I never realised that sometimes it's okay to take a step back and analyze where you are and analyze why you are there and listen to yourself. It's okay to listen to yourself sometimes, and I didn't realize that. The only way that I knew how to deal with what was going on in my head and how I was feeling was to either become very hostile and angry and a cold person, or to write. And one night I picked up my laptop and I started writing. I just wrote about how I was feeling, about how the the noise in my head was too loud and how I didn't know what it was like to be comfortable within myself or within my surroundings. I wrote about how depression was taking its toll on me, about how I didn't like going to certain places or being around certain people or doing certain things. I was tired and exhausted from years and years of going through life and not listening to myself. Definitely. And I remember one night I was bored of baking and I was bored of waiting for my Lush package to arrive, and I was bored of trying to get that next brand deal or that next sponsorship. So I decided to upload my depression, and it was called An Open Letter to Depression. And it was about how I'd wake up at 3:33 every single night, and that happened for about 3 or 4 months, and how I'd just sit there in the silence, and sometimes I'd cry, or sometimes I'd ask myself why I was feeling this way, and I was asking myself what I needed to do to change. But I knew that come the morning when I woke up, I would have no desire to change. You almost become comfortable with mental health and depression and feeling almost safe in that bubble of isolation and loneliness. It can be very, very safe sometimes, and you think that's okay. And so that's what I do at 3:33 every morning. And all of a sudden, it became the most viewed work I'd ever written and the most talked about. I had comments, I had inboxes, I had people left, right, and centre telling me that I wasn't alone, that they felt the same, and that changed something within me. And so Dancool Daily became less about the latest products for your bath and the latest albums to review. And I've got nothing but pride for people that do that. But I feel like I became the person that I was meant to be, and that was the person who discusses mental health openly. And that's not something I wear as a badge of honour or I take in my stride. I don't like being called an advocate or being known as an ambassador for mental health, because I'm not. I'm a boy who writes about his story and writes about his journey, the really great parts and the really gritty and breaking parts, and it helps me to put it somewhere. I wanted to create Let Me Explain Myself because, as someone who suffers with sometimes severe mental health, I know what it's like to constantly have to justify who you are and why you are that person. I constantly feel like I have to explain why I don't like going to certain places, or I don't like being in certain situations, or certain conversation topics will make me defensive and get my back up. And I didn't want to have to explain myself on that level anymore. But also, I didn't want other people to feel like they have to explain themselves. So, if you are watching this and you suffer mental health, I hope by the end of this you don't feel so alone and you don't feel like you have to justify your headspace to anyone anymore. And to anyone who's watching this that doesn't necessarily suffer from mental health or is surrounded by people that do suffer from mental health, I hope by watching this you can relate some of their headspace and some of their actions to the fact that it's mental health, and that we're not weird, we're not crazy, we're not psychos. We've just been through some things that make us see the world a little bit differently. I'm nervous and I'm scared, and I'm hoping I can achieve what I need to achieve with this. I give it 3 minutes before I'm crying. In terms of mental health, I think adoption shaped a lot for me. A lot. I didn't realise this until a couple of years ago when I was writing on Dancool Daily and I was toying with the idea of opening up about my adoption, and I was doing research, and the statistics that were coming through: increased cases of ADHD, of depression, and of separation anxiety are found in children that have been adopted compared to children who have stayed in their family home with their family unit. I have serious separation anxiety that I think was caused by my adoption. I don't like being away from people for too long. I like to keep my circle very closed and very passionate, very full on. I have 3 or 4 friends that I talk to every single day, and I will FaceTime every single day. And when they're not here, I feel lost and I feel a little bit scared and alone. And I worry if they're off making new best friends or if they're off even forgetting who I am. And that's not their fault, that's my fault. My relationships with men can be very quick, very impulsive. They are full of passion, they are full of conversation, and then they implode to nothing. And I get scared that at any moment they're going to realise I'm not good enough, and they're going to know what I already know, and that's that I'm hideous, I'm not pretty, I'm not beautiful, I'm fat, I'm not good enough to be in that relationship, and they'll move on. My adoption story is a little different to your average adoption, I guess. The story goes that my birth mother, for one reason or another, didn't want me, didn't want to raise me, didn't want to be involved in my life. So I went to live with my nan and granddad, and they raised me. And I was a couple of months old when they went on holiday. So my auntie and my uncle stepped in. Upon my nan and granddad's return, my auntie and my uncle could see that they were getting old and they should be enjoying their retirement and their time together. So they put in the motions to adopt me. Now, my auntie is my birth mum's sister. So at the time, you couldn't legally adopt family members because it would be seen as to confuse ties and relationship views within the family for me. And I understand it because trying to explain this story to people is, it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of effort. So, my auntie and my uncle became my legal guardians, which meant that they could make financial and medical decisions for me until the age of 16. But they weren't officially my mum and dad. I've always called them mum and dad. I've never felt any other way towards them. I have 3 siblings from my dad's previous relationship, and then I have one sibling who is my real mum's son. He's my real biological brother. We don't have contact. That door is open, but we just choose not to walk through it. I have never had a relationship with my biological father. I know his name. I've seen a picture. I know I've got siblings on his side from his relationships post relationship with my mum, and I know that he still exists, but I have questions about why he did what he did, but I don't think I'll ever ask them, and that's okay. I don't lose sleep over that one. My birth mum, however, I will always feel angry towards. I have seen her at family events and functions. I now choose not to take part in family events and functions because I don't want to risk running into her or risk having an unnecessary conversation with that woman. No. I remember being a child and being at a family function, and I knew who she was because it's never been a secret. And we were all playing, and she pulled my pants down in front of my whole family. And I remember that was the first time I remember feeling very embarrassed and truly shaken with embarrassment. And it still brings that feeling back today. And that's the first time I remember being angry at her. And I think I was angry at the situation more than I was angry at the event of having my pants pulled down. But it was still quite traumatic as a child. I remember her being a huge part of my life during my granddad's illness and death, and that wasn't choice that was because she's part of the family. She was going to be there, and it was hard seeing her with my brother and have them comfort and grieve together. But then on the flip side, I got to grieve with my parents and I got to be part of that family. And this is what I mean. It is so conflicting inside. So conflicting. Fast forward to a few years ago, and me and my partner at the time had just moved to Liverpool and decided to check out the International Music Festival. And whilst there, we bumped into an ex friend of mine who I hadn't seen or spoken to for a couple of years, and we decided to go for dinner. I stupidly checked us in on Facebook at the restaurant, and she turned up and she said hello. She was quite intoxicated. She was with her partner at the time, and then she sat at a table nearby and had dinner. She didn't pay for that dinner. She then left and waited outside for me. So, always wanting that opportunity and always wanting to grasp at that relationship that had never existed, I went with her for a drink, me and my partner, and her partner. And we were dragged around 3 or 4 bars looking for a mojito while she told me the incredible things that my brother was doing with his life. And not once did she ask what me or my boyfriend or what. She didn't ask me anything. She just spoke about my brother and her. And I remember her partner turning to her whilst we were sat outside a bar, and he asked if I was her nephew. And she laughed. And she told him that she'd explained it 100 times before and that she'd explain it again when she got home. And then her final words on that were, "It's quite a funny story." I don't know who that was funny to. I don't know who found that funny, but I didn't. And I remember going home and crying for hours and hours with my boyfriend because I was humiliated and I I was sad. Sorry. It doesn't matter how much they hurt you, and it doesn't matter what you've gotten through. I think you'll always crave that relationship with your birth parents when you're adopted, because I don't know if it's your instinct. I don't know if it's a craving for something that should have been or could have been. But that was the day I stopped, and that was the day I told myself never again. I've completely cut off contact. I never, ever want to hear from her again. Sorry. Being adopted is so strange because, on one hand, you feel so lucky and so loved to have been chosen by people who decided to put their life on hold for you and give you a real good, proper chance at life. And I am forever indebted to the 2 people that did that for me. But then on the other side, I have such resentment and anger towards the people that should have raised me, that should have been my parents. And I wouldn't change anything. I would never ever change how anything has gone. But that doesn't stop you from feeling some sort of anger and resentment. It's strange. There is 2 incredible, perfect people who put their life on hold for me and who made a conscious decision to raise me, and they love me unconditionally, and they are proud of me, and they push me in the right directions, and they help me to become a better person. And there's times when I've definitely needed to become that better person, and they are the people who have helped me to do that. They are the people who've steered me in the right direction, and I owe my life to them. If it wasn't for them, I probably would have fallen into the care system. I probably would have gone into foster care or into adoption with a whole new family and a whole new dynamic. And I owe them everything that I am today. But that never takes away from that initial fact that the people who were meant to want me didn't want me. I remember reading a statistic once that men who grow up without knowledge or a relationship of their paternal father are more likely to be homosexual, and those who've had broken relationships with their biological father, again, are more likely to be homosexual. I don't know how true that statistic was, but I read it at a time when I was feeling vulnerable and unsure about who I was. I wasn't confident in my sexuality. I wasn't sure if I was straight, gay, bi. I just wasn't sure of who I was. And that's the only time I have felt serious resentment towards him, because I, at the time, didn't want to be gay. I fought it. I went through that process that I think a lot of us LGBT plus go through, and that is fighting it. You are fighting against a boundary because you want to be considered normal. You want to have the wife and the children, and you want to fall in love with a woman, and you want to be normal. That's all you want to be, is normal. And I didn't feel normal. I felt very unsure, and I felt very unsafe, and I felt like the outcast, and that definitely changed a lot within me. And I remember placing all of that blame on him because I felt like it had made me a weaker person. My sexuality was never, it was never something that I understood and accepted straight away by any means. I had girlfriends, I had boyfriends, I convinced myself time and time again that I could fall in love with a woman, and every single time it came back to a man. And that was hard. And I think it's a process that not enough people speak about. I think people are very open and honest about their coming out story and about their story of love and finding that one person that makes them so sure of themselves. And I think not enough people discuss that time before when you are constantly fighting yourself. Constantly. I remember self-harming because I felt stupid and worthless for liking someone who was the same gender as me. I hated myself for having these thoughts because I grew up in a generation that was on the cusp of accepting sexuality for what it was, but there was still that loud, resounding voice of it being a choice, and there was a loud echo of it being wrong. And before I turned into an adult, you couldn't get married in a church if it was a same-sex wedding. That was tough because although I was being told on one breath that you should be who you are and you should be happy, I was being told by society that by being happy I was also being wrong and illegal, and I was being sinful. And I've never been religious. I don't follow religion. I don't have an interest in following religion, and that's not me being anti-religion. It's just never been for me, and that's okay if you are religious, and it's also okay if you're not religious. But for me, religion never worked. But yeah, I still remember feeling fearful of a God that I didn't necessarily believe in being disappointed and punishing me for being gay. I very much went into my shell. I didn't know who I was in school. I fluttered between friendship groups. I never had a set friendship group in school. I had clumps of friends, but I never had that best inseparable friend in school, because I could never settle long enough to establish that relationship. And I think that goes a lot to my adoption. I think it definitely be traced back to those relationship ties that I never had with my parents. And I also think a lot of it goes back to hiding my sexuality. I didn't know who to be. I couldn't be myself. Definitely not. So days I would be one of the lads, and another day I would put the football down and start doing dance during my lunch hour, and then another time I wanted to be part of the library group, so I would go and sit in the library. I just never ever had that set circle of people because I didn't know who I was to establish that. And that definitely changed a lot within me. I still today don't necessarily have large friendship groups. I don't settle well. It takes me a while to settle in new surroundings. I'm just about to start my master's degree, and I am absolutely dreading that first few weeks because I know I won't know who I am. I know I'll think in my head that I have to be who I should be rather than who I am. And that's hard. That is so, so hard. I don't think straight people truly understand what they are saying when they say they accept us and they love the gays and they have no problem with it, because there's still that wall between us that means that I still don't feel like I can be myself around you, because I am terrified of the gay jokes. I am terrified of being called a puff in jest. I am terrified of being left in a circle of straight men who are going to look at me differently, or who are going to step 2 feet away from me and make sure they've got their backs up against the wall. Like, it's not funny. It's damaging. It's so damaging. I had to get coffee today. I'm scared. For me, everything changed last year. It was the first full year of not being in university. I changed jobs. I moved home. And I really, really started to look after my mental health. I went to therapy for the first time. It was terrifying, and it took me 5 or 6 sessions to even open up about anything. I went through CBT, and then I stayed with my therapist, and now we have weekly catch-ups on the phone, and I go to see him once a month, and we've got a great relationship. But those initial sessions are one of the hardest things I've ever had to do for myself. I didn't want to talk about the things that I needed to talk about. I didn't want anyone to tell me that there was something wrong with me. I knew there was something wrong with me, but I didn't want the official diagnosis. I didn't want anyone to tell me the name of what was up with me, of the name of the thing that had been holding me back from so many opportunities and moving forward with my life. It was hard. So last year I was officially diagnosed with depression, with anxiety, and with PTSD. Oh, it's the first time I've said all of that out loud. We're still talking about what led me to suffer from depression and anxiety. There's a lot to unpack in those terms. But the PTSD was established pretty early on. And it comes down to one event in my life. And my first relationship with a man started off great. He was incredible. He was guiding. He was a real cool kid. I wasn't ready to come out or to announce to people who I was, and he was okay with it. He let me exist in this little world that we'd created, and we kept it to ourselves. As he left school, I knew that he had started experimenting with drugs, and I allowed it. It was my man. It was my first relationship. I stood by him. I defended him. I left school, and when I started college, we hit the rough patch. The drugs became more and more involved with his life. The verbal arguments became physical. He was lost. And I think I'd been the only consistent for so long that all he knew was to take it out on me. He decided to host a Halloween party. So we dressed up and we had fun. And then it got quite late and he said goodbye, and I thought, it's a bit strange, we're in your house, why are you saying goodbye? He'd taken a drug overdose and had left a note. Sorry. I remember that everything stopped. Everything stopped. I held my breath that day, and I went back to college on the Monday. And I told my best friend as it happened. I'd messaged her on Facebook. And then I went to college. I finished college. I went to university. And I lived the student life for a year. And then we went out one night to our favourite club. And we danced and we drank and we had fun. And then all of a sudden, a remix of Someone Like You by Adele came on. And I remember that feeling coming back, that I couldn't hear anything and I could only see people moving, but I couldn't feel it. I couldn't zone back into the real world, and I cried. I left and my friends got me a taxi. I got out of the taxi and I went missing. I remember thinking that if I looked hard enough, I'd find him. And it's a stupid thing to say out loud, but at the time I remember being genuinely convinced that if I looked hard enough, sorry, and so And so my friends were looking for me, and an ambulance was called. And my best friend, who's been my best friend for 7 years now, she sat with me in hospital and we talked about life. And I was there for 3 hours before I was seen by any sort of doctor or any sort of nurse. And I remember one doctor walking past, and I said, I feel like I'm going to kill myself. How much longer do I have to wait? And she told me how busy they were, and that if I wanted to go home and come back, I could. A few weeks later, me and my best friend decided to book a holiday to Ibiza. And for a week, we just existed. We didn't talk about anything. We didn't do anything. We just were best friends on holiday. And looking back, I think that saved me from a place that I was very close to slipping in. And so I quit university when I came home, and I moved back home, and I carried on with life, and I started a new relationship, and I carried on pushing through life. I moved to Liverpool, I started university again, I made enemies along the way, and I didn't really have many friends. I thought that I was doing really well. I thought that nobody could see the pain that I thought I was hiding and I was dealing with. But when I took a step back from myself and I began to write about mental health, I realised that the things I was typing, they weren't normal. They weren't right. Something was wrong. And my relationship ended. And I changed jobs and things began to move into a world that I needed to be in. I needed to look after myself. I needed to bubble wrap myself for a while. Relationships for me are the hardest thing to deal with mentally. I don't know. I don't know how to exist in a normal relationship because my first relationship had been so traumatic and so draining. And I think it set me up for a fail because I don't know what is considered a normal loving relationship. I don't believe in myself. I don't have any faith or confidence in myself. I don't think I'm pretty. I don't think I'm the type of person that you'd want to show off to your friends. I get very uncomfortable because I don't know how to handle it. I don't know how to tell people that such an overwhelming thing took place before you, and I still struggle with it some days because I get scared that they will think that I still pine after him, or that they will compare themselves to him. My PTSD is very intrusive when it comes to relationships. I don't like when I compare myself to other people. I don't like when I don't feel good enough and I don't feel like things are going the way that I thought they would in my head. I don't do well in big groups of gay people because there was times when I was made to feel uncomfortable in that situation, and I was told to look around because I'd never be as good as them. Today, fast forward through everything that's happened and bring it to the moment, I want nothing more than a solid group of people who are like me. I want nothing more than to feel good enough and beautiful for someone. And so it's easier for me to just joke that I'm going to be single for the rest of my life. And it's easier for me to call myself a potato and say that I look like a vegetable because in my head, no one will ever find me attractive. It's easy for me to use that as leverage. If I degrade myself, then any sort of degrading connotations you've got, they don't matter. It's only in the last year of trying to find myself and explore myself and sit down with my therapist and put myself outside that comfort zone and believe to myself that I have finally started to breathe again. Mental health for me, and in terms of my relationships, is a lot of self-doubt. I don't think that I can give people what they deserve, and I don't think that I can give someone myself because I don't think of myself as worthy enough. I never stopped. I never sat down and had that conversation with my parents. I don't know why. I think it's because it started off a secret and I was terrified of disappointing them. And I was terrified of overwhelming them. You know, you tell people that you went through this event and immediately they look at you differently. And immediately they treat you differently. I never wanted to become the person that was defined by the events that had happened to them. I never wanted to be that person who walks through life like they've got a lot of weight on their shoulders. When I look back through my adoption and I look back through my first relationship, it's very easy for me to become overwhelmed and to become lost in it because the two most fundamentally important relationships in my life have been damaged. You know, I never had that first relationship with my mum and dad. I had and still have the most incredible mum and dad in the entire world, but that doesn't change me not having a relationship with the people that I was meant to have a relationship with, if that makes any sense. And my first romantic relationship was a mess, and it ended even messier. And so, relationships, friendships, everything is hard for me because I struggle to understand what is normal. If I could tell myself anything, if I could take myself out of the situation and become something, I'd become comfortable within myself. This is it. It's the final day. Mental health to me is not something that's going to stop me. It's not an obstacle, it's a hurdle. It's something that I have to learn to live with, and it's something that I have to learn to work alongside. My mum was recently unwell, and she had to go through a series of operations, and she had to go into hospital for a while. And whenever people found out that she was ill, or whenever people found out that she was going through the operations, they had this look of shock on their face, because my mum is the healthy mum. She's never smoked, she doesn't drink, she never let it weaken her. She took it well in her stride, and she's always been that inspiration to me. She's been that strength when I've needed to know how to be strong and how to be standing on my own 2 feet. She's always been the person I look to for that. And whenever she told people and they showed their shocked face and they asked her how she was feeling, she just shrugged her shoulders and she said she was fine. To her, this was an obstacle that she had to overcome, and she wasn't going to let it dampen her life, and she hasn't. She's still living the most incredible life, and she's not once let it change the way that she lives. And I think that's something that I want to translate into mental health. I don't want it to change my life. I don't want it to define who I am. I want to work alongside it. I want to admit that I have those problems, but I don't want to let them hold me back anymore. Mental health is just as important as physical health, and we see that a lot. We read that a lot on Twitter. We have a great mental health community on Twitter. There is a lot of people that are there for people that they have no knowledge of. Strangers reaching out to strangers and becoming friends and becoming support networks for each other, and it is incredible to see. And it's something that I am so humble and so proud to be a part of. Mental health is crazy. I think that's the best way to explain it. It is a roller coaster of emotions. You take 12 steps forward and then you take 34 steps back. And I think the most important thing is to not let those steps back be permanent and not let them define your progress, because any steps forward is still moving in the right direction. And mental health is about that uphill battle. The stigma around mental health is the one thing that irritates me the most. It's the one thing that holds me back the most, because even though for the last 18 months I've been sharing my story so openly, and even though I've built myself up in therapy and I've taken so many steps forward, I think that when you hear derogatory comments or when you hear people rationalise it to man up, get over yourself, stop being so dramatic, I think that's when it hurts the most, because I already feel isolated enough in my headspace. I already feel alone and vulnerable and like I'm fighting this alone most days. And when I hear and read things like that, it's definitely a bitter pill to swallow. I want people to realise the small things about mental health rather than the big things. I think the big things are obvious. I think supporting people that are really upset and supporting friends and family that maybe are struggling and they're very openly struggling, I think just being that supportive ear and being that shoulder to lean on is an incredible, incredible thing. But I think when it comes to mental health, I think we forget the small things. When I don't reply to a text message, it's not because I'm avoiding you, and it's not because I'm too busy, or I don't want your friendship, or I don't want your companionship. It's because I need to take time to look after myself, and I shouldn't feel guilty about that, and neither should you if you ever do that. I think realizing that we see the world differently as a community and as people who have gone through things, or as people that are suffering in our headspace, I think that's that's the next step for me, is people understanding and respecting that we are different and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I would like next year to carry on talking so openly about my mental health, to build in solid friendships around myself, and to finally get over the demons and fall in love. Just last week, me and my mum were driving to the train station and we drove past a woman who was on the wrong side of a bridge ledge and she was ready to jump. So we quickly got out of the car and started talking to her, and my mum put her arms around her. And she was obviously clamping her in so she couldn't jump, but she was also being there for her. And for me, that was one of the most beautiful things to witness, is two complete strangers holding on to each other and talking through it. I never, ever can sit right knowing that people have spent months, sometimes years, building up the confidence and the courage and the comfortable feeling as well to reach out for help when they finally get to that level, and to reach out and ask someone, please help me, and for it to fall on deaf ears. I want people to realise that it takes so much to put down those barriers and to set aside your pride and reach out for help. My best friend is an incredible human. She understands my mental health as much as she can. She supports me. She doesn't let me fall over. She picks me up whenever I do. And sometimes we drift because my mental state isn't doing so well. And she'll text me and she'll say, I know you're struggling and I know you're going through a hard time, but when you're ready, I'm here. And we don't have to talk about what's going on. We can just pick up the conversation. And I can't tell you how comforting it is to know that when I do come back from my lull and when I do re-engage with the conversation, I don't have to justify or explain where I've been. I can just go back to being me. She was a lot of inspiration behind this because I wish there was more people like her supporting people like me, because I couldn't do it without that support system. I couldn't do it without my mum. I'm so blessed to have the parents that I do, and I guess it makes it even more lucky that we almost chose each other. On a personal level, I want to thank all of you for watching this. I don't think that many people will watch it, but if it helps just one of you that do, then I've done my job. Mental health will not beat us.